The first gunshot wasn't meant to kill anyone. It was fired into the crystal ceiling. Thousands of glittering fragments rained over the ballroom like frozen stars. Someone screamed. Someone else laughed. Then every armed bodyguard in the underground auction reached for their weapon. Yet only one woman remained seated. Emily Carter blinked in confusion as bits of crystal landed on her red evening dress. Was that part of the show? Nobody answered, because every eye inside the room had turned toward her, especially his. Across the velvet-covered auction hall stood the man whispered about in every criminal empire from New York to Sicily, Lorenzo De Luca, the Mafia king. Nearly 6'4", dressed entirely in black, his tailored suit looked as though darkness itself had been stitched into fabric. His expression never changed. It didn't need to. Men feared him before he spoke. Women admired him from a distance because surviving close enough to know him was nearly impossible. Tonight, however, for the first time in years, he looked genuinely shocked. Not angry, not amused, shocked. His dark eyes remained fixed on the antique jewelry box resting awkwardly in Emily's hands. No one noticed she was gripping it so tightly her knuckles had turned white. No one noticed she looked ready to apologize for existing. The auctioneer swallowed nervously. L lot 47. His voice trembled. Sold. Silence. To bidder number 89. Emily slowly raised one finger. Everyone looked at her. I think that's me. Another silence. Longer this time. Then somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered 2 words. Oh God. The room exploded into chaos. 20 minutes earlier, Emily had never intended to attend a secret underground auction. She had been trying to deliver cupcakes. That was the ridiculous part. Her best friend Melissa worked as an event planner. When Melissa called in tears because one of the catering assistants had quit an hour before the event, Emily agreed to help. She needed the extra cash. Her rent was already 4 days overdue. After paying for groceries, electricity, and medication for her elderly father, she had exactly $20 left inside her wallet. $20. Enough for bus fare. Enough for coffee. Enough to survive until Friday. She certainly wasn't expecting to walk into what looked like the lobby of an international palace. The abandoned theater above ground had appeared forgotten. Dust. Broken windows. Graffiti. But hidden beneath it. A private elevator descended nearly 100 feet underground. When the doors opened, Emily stepped into another world. Italian marble floors reflected enormous chandeliers. Champagne flowed like water. Women wore gowns worth more than houses. Men carried themselves with the effortless confidence of people accustomed to owning governments. Emily immediately regretted wearing the only formal dress she owned. Deep burgundy. Simple. Comfortable. Nothing compared to the diamonds surrounding her. She hurried toward the kitchen, delivered the desserts, collected empty trays, tried very hard not to stare. Then someone accidentally shoved an elegant black envelope into her hands. She assumed it contained a donation paddle. No one corrected her. No one even looked twice. Perhaps because confidence was the best disguise. Or perhaps because no one imagined someone so ordinary could ever matter. An hour later, Melissa was nowhere to be found. Emily wandered into the main ballroom searching for her. Rows of wealthy guests sat quietly before an illuminated stage. She chose an empty chair near the back. The event looked fascinating. She thought perhaps it was one of those charity galas wealthy people enjoyed. The auctioneer smiled. Our final collection. 2 guards wheeled out an ancient wooden chest. Inside rested a breathtaking ruby necklace. It wasn't merely beautiful. It looked important, centuries old. The central ruby glowed beneath the chandelier light like captured fire. People stopped breathing. Even Emily found herself staring. It once belonged to the House of De Luca. The room shifted, not physically, emotionally, like a predator had entered unseen. Emily noticed dozens of guests glance toward the tall man seated near the front. Lorenzo never moved, never blinked. The auctioneer continued. Opening bid, $5 million. Emily nearly choked. She quietly reached for her purse. Maybe it was time to leave. Then something strange happened. Everyone raised the black cards they had received at registration. Emily looked down. She had one too. Oh, so that's what this is. The bids climbed rapidly. 7 million, 10, 15, 25, 30. The numbers became almost meaningless. Emily watched in amazement. It felt less like money, more like kingdoms changing hands. Finally, only 2 bidders remained, Lorenzo and an older Russian man whose icy smile never reached his eyes. The tension became unbearable. 42 million, 43, 45, 48, 50. The Russian nodded again. 52 million, the audience murmured. The auctioneer looked toward Lorenzo. The mafia boss remained perfectly still. Then, he slowly lifted one finger. 60 million. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. The Russian's smile disappeared. His jaw tightened. For several agonizing seconds, no one spoke. Finally, the Russian leaned back, defeated. The auctioneer smiled with visible relief. Sold to... Just then, Emily noticed everyone raising their cards. She frowned. Oh, maybe we're supposed to vote? Trying not to appear rude, she lifted her paddle. Number 89. The auctioneer froze. His face drained of color. Every bodyguard looked at one another. Lorenzo slowly turned his head. The room became impossibly quiet. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Bibiter? He stared at Emily as though she'd materialized from thin air. 89? Emily smiled awkwardly. Yes? You wish to place another bid? She blinked. I thought. Pause. This was for donations. Several people actually covered their mouths. One elderly billionaire looked ready to faint. The auctioneer whispered, the current bid is $60 million. Emily laughed. Oh. Then she realized nobody else was laughing. Her smile slowly disappeared. Wait. The silence became deafening. Don't have $60 million. The auctioneer swallowed. Then why did you raise your paddle? Emily looked horrified. I thought you meant $20. A woman in the front row nearly dropped her champagne. Someone muttered, she's insane. Another whispered, she's dead. Before Emily could apologize, an elderly man in a white tuxedo hurried onto the stage and whispered frantically into the auctioneer's ear. The auctioneer's expression shifted from panic to disbelief. He checked a tablet, then checked it again. Finally, he looked directly at Emily. Miss, your registration envelope contained a sealed proxy authorization. Emily frowned. A what? It legally transferred the right to place one anonymous final bid. Emily stared blankly. I still don't understand. The auctioneer inhaled deeply. The anonymous donor attached exactly $20. The room erupted into confused murmurs. He continued, and according to the auction's founding rules established in 1919, a proxy bid submitted after the hammer falls automatically overrides every previous offer, regardless of value. Silence. Absolute silence. Emily blinked. So, did I. The auctioneer looked physically ill. And when? Nobody answered. Because at that exact moment, Lorenzo De Luca slowly stood. Every chair creaked as people instinctively backed away from him. His gaze never left Emily. Not once. He wasn't looking at the woman. He was looking at the jewelry box in her trembling hands, as though history itself had just slipped through his fingers. Then he began walking toward her, one calm step at a time. No hurry, no anger, which somehow made him infinitely more terrifying. Emily's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She had no idea why everyone suddenly looked frightened. She certainly didn't know why dozens of armed guards had quietly surrounded the exits, or why the Russian billionaire had slipped out moments earlier with a smile that promised bloodshed. Lorenzo stopped less than 3 feet away. He was even taller up close. His voice was low, controlled, almost gentle. What is your name? Emily swallowed. Emily. Pause. Then she forced a nervous smile. I'm really sorry if I accidentally ruined your auction. For the first time in years. The Mafia King almost smiled, but it wasn't amusement. It was the expression of a man realizing fate had just rewritten his entire life. He looked into her frightened eyes, then quietly said, "You didn't ruin my evening." He glanced toward the sealed jewelry box. "You started a war." For 3 endless seconds, no one moved. No one breathed. Emily wasn't even sure the room still existed. All she could see was the man standing in front of her, Lorenzo De Luca. His face revealed almost nothing, yet somehow everything around him had changed. The conversations had died. Glasses stopped clinking. Even the orchestra hidden behind velvet curtains had fallen silent. Power had a sound. It sounded like complete silence. Emily instinctively tightened her grip on the antique jewelry box. "I'm really sorry," she repeated softly. "There has to be some mistake." "There isn't." His voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow frightened her more. "You won the auction, but I don't even have $20 anymore." "I know." She blinked. "You know. I know exactly how much money you have." The words sent an unexpected chill down her spine. She forced herself to laugh. "That's an odd thing to say. It wasn't meant to comfort you." His eyes briefly drifted toward the ruby necklace resting inside the velvet-lined box. "It was meant to explain why you should never open it." Across the ballroom, Viktor Orlov watched them from the shadows. The old Russian crime lord slowly removed his gloves. "So," he murmured, "the rumors were true." One of his men leaned closer. "Should we eliminate the girl now?" Viktor smiled. "No." His pale blue eyes followed Lorenzo. "Killing her now would start a war before I know what she possesses." He slipped a silver lighter into his pocket. "But the moment she leaves this building," his smile disappeared. "She belongs to whoever reaches her first." Emily had no idea that nearly 50 armed men had just received the same order through hidden earpieces. Capture the girl, alive if possible, dead if necessary. The underground auction had never ended. It had merely changed. Now, she was the prize. Lorenzo looked over his shoulder. Almost imperceptibly, one tiny glance. It was enough. His head of security understood immediately. Within seconds, 4 enormous men in black suits casually repositioned themselves around Emily. Not aggressively, protectively. She noticed, why are they standing so close? Lorenzo ignored the question. Instead, he asked, "Did anyone invite you here tonight?" "My friend." "Where is she?" Emily looked around. Melissa was nowhere. She frowned. She was helping with catering. Lorenzo's expression hardened almost invisibly. "What is her full name?" "Melissa Grant." One of his bodyguards quietly spoke into an earpiece. 10 seconds later, he returned. "Boss." His voice barely rose above a whisper. "No employee by that name exists." Emily laughed nervously. "That's impossible." "It isn't. I've known her for 6 years." The bodyguard didn't answer. Lorenzo simply watched Emily's face. She wasn't lying. He could tell. That made the situation infinitely worse. Elsewhere beneath the theater, a woman's body lay inside an empty storage room, still wearing a catering uniform. A small silver ring rested beside her hand. Her employee badge read, "Melissa Grant." She had been dead for nearly an hour. Emily's phone vibrated. She smiled with relief. "Say?" She held up the screen. "It's Melissa." She answered immediately. "Melissa, where are you?" Something really strange happened. Only static answered. Then, a man's voice. Low, cold. "If you want to stay alive." The line crackled. "Don't trust the man standing beside you." The call ended. Emily stared at the screen. "What?" Before she could speak, the ballroom lights went out. Everything disappeared into darkness. Someone screamed. A second later, automatic gunfire exploded through the room. Glass shattered. Tables overturned. Guests dropped to the marble floor. Bodyguards drew weapons, almost simultaneously. Emily never saw who grabbed her. One moment she was standing. The next, powerful arms wrapped around her waist. Her feet left the ground, She gasped. Lorenzo. He carried her behind a massive marble pillar, just as bullets tore through the spot where she'd been standing. Stone exploded inches above her head. Dust filled the air. Her ears rang. She instinctively buried her face against his chest. His heartbeat was perfectly steady, as if bullets were merely an inconvenience. Find the shooters. Lorenzo's voice remained frighteningly calm. No survivors. His men disappeared into the darkness. Emily slowly looked up. You. Her voice trembled. You could have been shot. I wasn't. You don't know that. I do. More bullets echoed somewhere across the ballroom. Lorenzo didn't even flinch. Instead, he looked down at her. You smell like vanilla. Emily blinked. What? The cupcakes. She stared. You notice that now? I notice everything. The intensity in his eyes made it impossible to look away. For a strange moment, the gunfire faded into the background. There was only silence. Only inches separated them. He slowly reached toward her face. Emily's breath caught. Was he going to touch her? His fingers stopped, barely an inch from her cheek. Instead, he removed a tiny shard of crystal tangled in her hair. Nothing more. He stepped back immediately. Professional, controlled, as though the moment had never happened. Emily didn't know why she suddenly felt disappointed. An explosion shook the entire building. The chandeliers crashed. Flames erupted near the stage. People rushed toward every exit, exactly as the attackers had planned. Chaos, perfect chaos. Marco Romano, Lorenzo's oldest friend and second in command, appeared beside them. We have 3 escape routes. Lorenzo shook his head. They'll expect that. Marco frowned. Then what? Lorenzo glanced at Emily. They're hunting one person. Emily swallowed. Me? Yes. She looked at the antique jewelry box. I don't even want this thing. You can't give it back. Why? Because the moment anyone else touches it, he paused. They become the target instead. Emily looked horrified. So this is my fault. No. His voice sharpened. This began long before you were born. Outside, dozens of black SUVs surrounded the abandoned theater. Engines running, doors open. Heavily armed soldiers took positions behind vehicles. Across the street, Russian snipers occupied rooftops. Italian gunmen hid inside neighboring buildings. A Colombian cartel had arrived without invitation. Even the Irish mob was watching from a nearby bar. Word had spread in under 6 minutes. The De Luca heirloom had disappeared, and nobody intended to leave Chicago empty-handed. Inside the collapsing ballroom, Emily's breathing became uneven. I just wanted to help deliver cupcakes. Marco almost smiled. You chose an unfortunate evening. I didn't choose anything. I know. Lorenzo looked toward a hidden corridor. Come. Emily didn't move. I don't know you. No. You could be lying. Yes. You could be using me. Possibly. She stared. You admit that? I don't lie unless it's necessary. That's somehow worse. For the first time, the corner of Lorenzo's mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close enough that Marco almost forgot they were under attack. Another burst of gunfire echoed through the hallway, this time much closer. One of Lorenzo's men staggered backward, blood soaking his shoulder. They're inside! Lorenzo instantly pushed Emily behind him. She watched him draw a black pistol with almost graceful precision. His expression didn't change, not even slightly. He fired twice. 2 muffled shots. 2 bodies collapsed before they even reached the doorway. Emily covered her mouth. She had never seen anyone die. Not until now. Lorenzo immediately turned toward her. Don't look. Too late. She already had. A tear escaped before she realized she was crying. I'm sorry, she whispered. I've never. Her voice broke. Lorenzo's eyes softened for the briefest fraction of a second. Not with pity, with something more dangerous. Protectiveness. He hated the feeling immediately. He didn't know her. She had cost him everything he came to recover. She should have been a complication. Instead, his first instinct had been to shield her with his own body. That wasn't strategy. It was weakness. And weakness got men like him killed. Marco interrupted quietly. The west tunnel is compromised. The east? Explosive. The river exit? Snipers. Lorenzo looked at Emily, then toward the ballroom entrance where dozens of armed enemies were closing in. He made his decision. We're not escaping. Emily's face turned pale. What? We're walking out. Marco frowned. Boss, they expect fugitives. His dark eyes settled on Emily. They won't expect a couple. Emily blinked. A couple? Lorenzo calmly removed his tailored black overcoat. He draped it over her shoulders. The expensive fabric almost swallowed her entire frame. Then he reached for her trembling hand. His fingers wrapped around hers. Warm. Strong. Certain. Emily instinctively looked up at him. What are you doing? His voice became almost a whisper. For the next hour. You're my fiancé. She opened her mouth to protest. Before she could, he leaned close enough that only she could hear. And whatever happens, his thumb gently tightened around her hand. Don't let go of me. Emily stared at their joined hands. His grip was firm without being painful. Steady, protective, possessive. It felt less like a man taking her hand, and more like a king claiming responsibility for something everyone else wanted to destroy. She swallowed. I'm not your fiancé. Lorenzo didn't even look at her. No. Then why would anyone believe us? They don't have to. His dark eyes scanned the burning ballroom with calculated precision. They only need to hesitate. Another explosion thundered through the underground hall. Smoke rolled across the marble floor like black water. The emergency lights flickered to life, bathing the room in a crimson glow that made everyone look like ghosts. Marco stepped closer. Boss, Victor's men have reached the eastern corridor. Lorenzo nodded once. Good. Emily frowned. Good? If Victor believes I'm escaping east, his lips barely moved. He won't notice me leaving west. Marco smiled. I'll keep him occupied. You'll keep him angry. Same thing. Without another word, Marco disappeared into the smoke with nearly 20 De Luca soldiers. Seconds later, automatic gunfire erupted from the eastern wing. The deception had begun. Lorenzo guided Emily toward a narrow service hallway hidden behind velvet curtains. She could barely keep up. Slow down. We don't have that luxury. My shoes weren't made for running. They'll have to learn. She shot him an irritated look despite the danger surrounding them. You know, for someone pretending to be engaged, he glanced sideways. You're remarkably unfriendly. The corner of his mouth twitched. You expected flowers? I expected less kidnapping. I'm rescuing you. I didn't ask to be rescued. No. His voice remained maddeningly calm. You simply made it necessary. They emerged into an empty corridor lined with antique paintings. Gone were the glittering chandeliers and wealthy guests. Here, everything felt forgotten. Dust coated the walls. The lights buzzed weakly overhead. Emily's heartbeat slowly began to settle, until she noticed something. The silence, no footsteps, no voices, nothing. Why is it so quiet? Lorenzo stopped walking. Because his hand instinctively moved in front of her. They're waiting. Before Emily could ask what he meant, 3 laser sights appeared on Lorenzo's chest. Then 6. Then 10. Red dots glowed across his black suit. Hidden snipers. Every instinct screamed for Emily to run. Instead, Lorenzo calmly sighed. I was wondering how long you'd wait. A voice echoed from the darkness. Drop the box. Victor Orlov stepped from behind a stone column, slowly clapping. He was no longer smiling. Nearly 40 armed men surrounded the hallway. Shotguns, assault rifles, silenced pistols. Enough firepower to erase an army. Victor looked at Emily. So, his icy blue eyes examined her from head to toe. This is the woman who embarrassed the De Luca family. Emily immediately corrected him. It was an accident. I know. He smiled pleasantly, which somehow makes it even more entertaining. Lorenzo's expression never changed. You'll never leave this hallway alive. Victor chuckled. You've become sentimental. I've become patient. No. The Russian shook his head. You've become distracted. His gaze shifted toward Emily. And distraction gets kings killed. Emily quietly whispered, "Who is he?" Without taking his eyes off Victor, Lorenzo answered, "The man who murdered my uncle." Victor laughed loudly. "You finally admitted it. You already know." "Of course." His smile widened. "I simply enjoy hearing you say it." The hatred between them filled the corridor like smoke. Emily suddenly realized this wasn't business. This was personal. Very personal. Victor extended one gloved hand. "Give me the necklace." Emily looked down at the jewelry box. "I don't want it." "I know." "Then take it." "I can't." She blinked. "What? If you hand it over willingly?" His voice softened almost kindly. "De Luca's men will never stop hunting me." He shrugged. "If I kill you and take it." He smiled. "They'll call it war." Emily looked horrified. "So, either way, someone dies." She looked toward Lorenzo. He simply nodded. "He isn't lying." Emily's stomach twisted. "I don't understand." She looked between the two mafia leaders. "It's just a necklace." Neither man answered. That silence frightened her more than any explanation could have. Suddenly, Lorenzo took one slow step forward. Every rifle immediately adjusted toward his head. He ignored them. "You brought too many men." Victor smiled. "I brought enough. You brought witnesses." "And?" Lorenzo looked almost amused. "I dislike witnesses." Emily didn't understand. Victor did. His smile faded. "Lorenzo." Too late. The hallway lights exploded. Darkness swallowed everything. The first scream echoed from somewhere behind Victor's soldiers. Then another. Then another. Gunfire erupted from both ends of the corridor. Muzzle flashes briefly illuminated the darkness. Bodies collapsed. Someone shouted, "Behind us!" Another screamed, "Second team!" Chaos consumed the hallway. Emily instinctively covered her ears. "What is happening?" Lorenzo's voice remained steady beside her. "My family." "You had more people?" "I always do." Hidden doors burst open along the corridor walls. De Luca soldiers poured into the hallway from secret passageways built nearly a century earlier. Victor's ambush had become his trap. Smoke filled the air. Bullets ricocheted from marble columns. Emily felt herself pulled backward. Lorenzo wrapped one arm firmly around her waist. "Stay behind me." "I'm trying." A gunman suddenly appeared from the smoke only yards away. He aimed directly at Emily. Time seemed to stop. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The trigger began to squeeze. A single shot rang out. The attacker collapsed before firing. Emily looked up. Lorenzo still held his pistol raised. His expression hadn't changed, not even after taking a life. He looked at her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. He nodded once. "Good. Nothing more." As though protecting her had become instinct, Victor retreated deeper into the corridor. "Fall back." His remaining men formed a defensive line. Before disappearing into the smoke, he looked directly at Emily. "You won't survive the week." Then he vanished. Silence slowly returned, broken only by the crackling of fire somewhere overhead. Emily looked around. Bodies lay scattered across the marble floor. Blood-stained, priceless paintings. The smell of gunpowder hung heavy in the air. She felt sick, very sick. Lorenzo noticed immediately. He removed a clean white handkerchief from his pocket. Without a word, he gently tied it over her eyes. "Darkness." "What are you doing?" "You don't need to remember this." "But I do." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "I've seen enough death for both of us." Emily froze. For several seconds, she simply listened. His breathing, his footsteps, the quiet commands he gave his men. She realized something. Behind the cold voice, behind the terrifying reputation, there was exhaustion, a loneliness so deep it almost hurt to hear. When he finally removed the blindfold, they stood inside a hidden underground train station. Emily blinked. "What is this place?" "The old escape route beneath Chicago." "There are trains down here?" "There used to be." Dim lanterns illuminated ancient stone tunnels stretching into darkness. A sleek black armored vehicle waited on the abandoned tracks. Emily looked around in amazement. You people really prepare for everything. Lorenzo opened the passenger door. No. What do you mean? We prepare because eventually... He looked into the darkness behind them. Everything goes wrong. As they climbed into the vehicle, Marco's voice crackled through the radio. We lost 12 men. Silence. We confirmed Orlov escaped. Another pause. And... Marco hesitated. We found something. Lorenzo immediately understood. What? A body. Emily looked toward him. Marco continued quietly. The woman from the catering company. Emily's heart skipped. Melissa. We confirmed her identity. Silence. Then, I'm sorry, boss. Emily stared at Lorenzo. What is he talking about? No one answered. Lorenzo. Her voice trembled. Where's Melissa? He slowly turned toward her. His eyes held something she'd never seen before. Not fear. Not anger. Regret. The friend who invited you here. He paused. Never made it inside the auction. Emily felt the world tilt beneath her. No. I'm sorry. No. She shook her head violently. You're wrong. I wish I was. No. Tears filled her eyes. I talked to her this afternoon. I know. She promised we'd split the extra money. Her voice broke completely. She promised. Lorenzo watched as Emily's world shattered. He had delivered news of death countless times. It never became easier. Emily buried her face in her hands. Quiet sobs echoed through the underground tunnel. Lorenzo wanted to comfort her. Instead, he remained perfectly still, because men like him didn't know how. Several minutes passed before Emily finally spoke, almost whispering. Why? Lorenzo answered honestly. Someone needed you at that auction. She slowly looked up. You think Melissa was murdered? Because of me? No. His jaw tightened. I think... He stared at the antique jewelry box resting between them. Someone planned for you to win long before you ever walked into that ballroom. Emily felt another chill crawl down her spine. What are you saying? Lorenzo's eyes met hers. For the first time tonight, he looked uncertain. I don't think you were invited by accident. The armored vehicle disappeared into the darkness beneath Chicago. Above them, the city carried on as if nothing had happened. But somewhere in the shadows, someone had already begun the next move. Because Emily Carter wasn't just the woman who had outbid the Mafia king anymore, she had become the center of a conspiracy that had been waiting 20 years for her to arrive. The armored SUV rolled through the abandoned railway tunnel without a sound. Outside the reinforced windows, darkness swallowed everything. Emily sat motionless. Melissa was dead. The words refused to settle in her mind. Just yesterday, they had laughed over cheap takeout. Melissa had teased her for never saying yes to dates. You deserve someone who looks at you like you're the only woman in the room. Emily had laughed. That only happens in movies. Now, Melissa was gone, and the only man looking at her that way was the most feared mafia boss in America. Lorenzo sat across from her. He hadn't spoken in nearly 15 minutes. Neither had she. Only the quiet hum of the armored engine filled the silence. Marco's voice occasionally crackled through the encrypted radio. Perimeter Team Alpha reporting. Bridge secured. No pursuit detected. Then, a different voice. Boss. Lorenzo answered immediately. Speak. We found 12 surveillance cameras around the theater. Emily frowned. 12? The voice continued. None belong to Olo. Silence. Someone else recorded the entire auction. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Recover every storage device. We already tried. Another pause. They were wiped remotely. Emily slowly looked at him. You have another enemy? Lorenzo answered without hesitation. I have hundreds. She sighed. I was hoping you'd say no. I don't lie. I've noticed. A faint smile almost reached his eyes. Almost 2 hours later, the SUV emerged through a hidden steel gate beneath an abandoned warehouse near Lake Michigan. From the outside, it looked forgotten. Rust covered the walls. Broken windows overlooked empty train tracks. Inside, it was an entirely different world. massive security doors, fingerprint scanners, bulletproof glass, dozens of armed guards, luxury hidden beneath decay. Emily stared in disbelief. You live here? No. You hide here? When necessary. So, she looked around the enormous underground facility. This isn't your home. Lorenzo glanced toward the elevator. I stopped calling any place home years ago. The elevator descended another 6 floors. When the doors opened, Emily expected another bunker. Instead, she stepped into what looked like the lobby of an ultra-luxury hotel. Warm lighting, Italian marble, fresh flowers, original artwork. A grand piano sat near floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the dark waters of Lake Michigan. She blinked. She looked around, is beautiful. Lorenzo simply removed his jacket. I dislike ugly places. A woman in her 60s approached with remarkable confidence. Elegant silver hair, simple black dress, kind eyes. She looked directly at Lorenzo. You're bleeding. It's not mine. It rarely is. Only then did she notice Emily. Her expression softened. Oh, she smiled warmly. So, this is the guest. Emily extended a nervous hand. Emily Carter. The older woman ignored the handshake. Instead, she wrapped Emily in a gentle hug. You've had a terrible evening. Emily froze. She hadn't expected kindness. Not here. Not in a Mafia safe house. The woman smiled. I'm Sophia. She looked toward Lorenzo. You frightened her. I protected her. You can do both. Emily couldn't help smiling. So, she whispered, someone actually argues with him? Sophia laughed. I've been doing it since he was 12. Lorenzo sicht. You encourage rebellion. I encourage humanity. Emily was led upstairs to an enormous bedroom. It was larger than her apartment. A king-size bed overlooked the lake. A fireplace crackled quietly. Fresh clothes waited neatly, folded on the bed. She looked down at herself. Her dress was stained with dust and blood that wasn't hers. Only then did she realize how exhausted she was. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Sophia entered carrying a tray. Hote. Soap. Fresh bread. You haven't eaten. Emily stared. She hadn't. Not since breakfast. The older woman placed everything beside the bed. Eat. I don't want to impose. My dear. Sophia smiled gently. In this house, no one survives on an empty stomach. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, Lorenzo stood inside his private office. The room was dark except for one desk lamp. Maps covered one wall. Photographs covered another. Marco entered carrying a secure metal case. We searched the necklace. And nothing. No hidden compartment. No tracking device. No documents. Marco hesitated. The heirloom is genuine. Lorenzo looked toward the velvet jewelry box resting on his desk. It isn't the necklace. Marco frowned. What do you mean? The person who arranged tonight's auction. He slowly opened the wooden box. Wanted Emily. Marco stared. You think she's the objective? I know she is. He carefully examined the inside of the jewelry box. His fingers traced the carved wooden interior. Then, he stopped. Barely visible beneath one velvet corner, a tiny symbol had been engraved. An oak tree. Marco leaned closer. I've never seen that crest. Lorenzo had. His expression changed instantly. Impossible. His heartbeat quickened for the first time in years. No. Marco looked confused. What? Lorenzo whispered almost to himself. The Ash Society. The what? The people responsible. His voice became colder than ice. For killing my parents. 20 years earlier, Lorenzo had been 9 years old. His family's estate outside Palermo had burned through the night. Officially, it had been blamed on a gas explosion. Unofficially, every Mafia family knew it had been murder. No witnesses. No evidence. Only one clue remained. An oak tree carved into melted silver. He had spent 20 years searching for whoever used that symbol. Now, it had appeared again, hidden inside a jewelry box. One by Emily Carter. Upstairs, Emily stood beneath steaming water. She scrubbed smoke from her skin, blood from her arms, dust from her hair, but nothing washed away the images. The gunfire, the screaming, Melissa, or Lorenzo shielding her with his own body. She closed her eyes. Why? He barely knew her. Why would a man like him risk everything for a complete stranger? A knock interrupted her thoughts. Emily? It was Sophia. Yes? I left something outside your door. After several minutes, Emily wrapped herself in a thick white robe and opened it. There, folded carefully, was a beautiful dark blue sweater, soft jeans, comfortable shoes, exactly her size. She frowned. How? Downstairs. Marco looked equally confused. Boss. He held up a receipt. The clothing order. What about it? It was placed. He checked again. 3 weeks ago. Lorenzo frowned. Impossible. The sizes match Emily perfectly. Silence. Neither man spoke. Finally, Marco quietly asked, Have you met her before? No. Then why? Lorenzo slowly took the receipt. Female, size 18, blue sweater, white sneakers. Everything waiting upstairs had been ordered weeks before the auction. Someone had expected Emily to arrive. Emily wandered into the library, unable to sleep. The safe house was strangely peaceful. Rain tapped softly against enormous windows. Thousands of books lined dark wooden shelves. She smiled. This is my favorite room. So I guessed. The deep voice startled her. Lorenzo stood beside the fireplace, without his suit jacket, without a tie. For the first time, he looked less like a mafia king, and more like an exhausted man carrying too much weight. She crossed her arms. You don't sleep much. No, you should. I've tried. Silence settled comfortably between them. Emily wandered toward the shelves. You read? He looked almost offended. I can. She laughed. I didn't mean. I know. He watched her pull an old copy of Pride and Prejudice from the shelf. You've read this? Twice. She smiled. My grandmother loved Jane Austen. My mother did too. The word slipped out before he realized it. His expression hardened immediately. Emily noticed. You miss her. He didn't answer. She gently returned the book. I'm sorry. He looked at the fire. Sue and I. Another silence. Not awkward. Just quiet. Emily studied him. The scars on his hands. The faint cut above one eyebrow. The exhaustion hidden beneath perfect control. Finally, she asked, Can I ask you something? You just did. She rolled her eyes. Seriously. He nodded once. Why didn't you let me give Victor the necklace? His answer came instantly. Because he would have killed you anyway. You don't know that. I do. How? He watched you. Emily frowned. What do you mean? He never looked at the necklace. Lorenzo met her eyes. He only watched you. A chill crawled down her spine. Before she could answer, every light inside the safe house went black. The fireplace died. Emergency alarms exploded throughout the building. Red lights flashed across the hall. Marco's voice thundered through hidden speakers. Boss, we've lost every security camera. Another voice shouted. Power grid compromised. Then, the final message. One that froze everyone. Unknown intruder. Silence. Inside the house. Lorenzo instantly pulled Emily behind him. His pistol appeared in his hand almost faster than she could see. He whispered without looking away from the dark hallway. Stay behind me. Footsteps echoed somewhere upstairs. Slow. Deliberate. As though whoever had entered wanted them to hear. Then, a woman's voice drifted through the darkness. Soft. Calm. Almost familiar. Emily. Emily's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice. It couldn't be. Her lips trembled. Melissa. The footsteps stopped just outside the library door. A shadow appeared through the frosted glass. Then a quiet laugh echoed in the darkness. You should never have gone to that auction. The laughter faded into silence. Emily couldn't breathe. It was Melissa. The same gentle voice. The same soft laugh. the same unmistakable tone that had comforted her through 6 years of friendship. Her knees nearly gave out. Melissa? The shadow behind the frosted glass didn't answer. Instead, 3 slow knocks echoed against the library door. Knock, knock, knock. Lorenzo never took his eyes off the entrance. His pistol remained perfectly steady. No one opens that door. Emily stepped forward anyway. You don't understand. I understand enough. That's my friend. No. His voice was colder than the steel in his hand. Your friend is dead. You don't know that. I confirmed it. You confirmed a body. Emily's voice cracked. You never let me see her. Silence. For the briefest moment, hope overwhelmed reason. What if they had been wrong? What if Melissa had survived? What if everything had been a terrible mistake? Another knock. Softer this time. Emily. The voice trembled. Please. I'm scared. Tears filled Emily's eyes. She reached for the doorknob. A firm hand gently wrapped around her wrist. Lorenzo, you open that door. His eyes never left the shadow, and I may not be able to save you. Outside the library, the unknown woman leaned against the wall. She smiled. So, she whispered, he's smarter than I expected. She calmly reached into her coat, not for a gun, for a small wireless transmitter. One press of a button, somewhere inside the mansion. 3 silent explosions shattered the emergency power system. The lights flickered again. The entire building shook. Downstairs, Marco slammed a security monitor with his fist. Damn it. Every camera feed had gone black. Every electronic lock had disengaged simultaneously. Someone wasn't merely inside the safe house. Someone knew its systems better than the people who built them. A security guard ran into the control room. We found the breach. Where? The old medical wing? Marco frowned. That section was sealed years ago. Not anymore. Back inside the library, Emily finally looked at Lorenzo. If there's even a chance she's alive. His expression softened slightly. I know. You know what it feels like to lose someone. I do. Then please. She looked into his eyes. Let me see. For the first time that evening, Lorenzo hesitated. Not because he believed the voice. Because he couldn't bear watching hope die in Emily's eyes a second time. Finally, he nodded once. But you stay behind me. The massive oak door slowly opened. Empty hallway. No Melissa. Only dim red emergency lights stretching into darkness. Emily stepped closer. Melissa. No answer. Then she noticed something on the floor. A silver bracelet. Her heart stopped. She immediately recognized it. She had given it to Melissa on her birthday 5 years ago. She picked it up with trembling fingers. It's hers. Lorenzo carefully examined it. No. Emily stared. What? It belonged to her. What difference does that make? It was placed here. He turned the bracelet over. Tiny scratches marked the inside. Fresh scratches. Not years old. Hours. Someone had deliberately left it outside the library. For Emily. A faint clicking sound echoed above them. Lorenzo's eyes instantly shot toward the ceiling. His expression changed. Down. He tackled Emily to the floor just as dozens of steel darts erupted from hidden vents. The poisoned projectiles embedded themselves in the wooden walls where Emily had been standing less than a second earlier. One grazed Lorenzo's shoulder. Emily gasped. You're hit. He immediately snapped the dart in half before the poison could spread. Surface wound. Blood slowly soaked through his white shirt. Emily grabbed his arm. Sit down. I'm fine. No. Her voice suddenly carried the same authority she used with frightened children in her classroom. Sit. For reasons he couldn't explain, he obeyed. Emily carefully examined the wound. You said it barely touched you. It did. She frowned. Then why are you bleeding so much? He looked away. I heal slower than I pretend. She almost smiled. So you're stubborn. I've been called worse. She carefully cleaned the cut with supplies from a nearby emergency cabinet. You really need stitches. I don't have time. You'll make time. His dark eyes met hers. She wasn't intimidated. Not even a little. You always tell dangerous men what to do, only the impossible ones. For the first time, Lorenzo actually smiled. A real one, small, brief, but genuine. Emily noticed immediately. There it is. What? The smile. It wasn't. It absolutely was. It never happened. She laughed quietly. You know, I think you're terrified of being happy. The word struck deeper than any bullet. Elsewhere, 2 floors below, the mysterious intruder calmly walked through the abandoned medical wing. Every movement was deliberate. Precise. She stopped before an old operating room. The walls had been covered years earlier. Hidden behind them, an ancient steel vault remained untouched. She entered a 6-digit code. Nothing. She frowned. So, she whispered, they already moved it. A voice echoed behind her. I wondered who would come looking. She slowly turned. Marco stood at the end of the corridor, surrounded by 12 armed De Luca soldiers. He smiled. You're good. The woman smiled back. I'm better. Without warning, she threw a flash grenade. White light consumed the hallway. By the time anyone could see again, she was gone. Only one thing remained. A playing card. The Queen of Hearts. Marco stared at it, his face drained of color. No. One of the guards looked confused. Who is she? Marco quietly answered. The Ghost Queen. Upstairs. Emily finished bandaging Lorenzo's shoulder. There. She stepped back. You'll live. I was planning to. She folded her arms. You're welcome. Thank you. The word sounded unfamiliar coming from him. Almost awkward. Emily smiled. I didn't know Mafia bosses said thank you. They usually don't. So why did you... His answer surprised even himself. Because you cared whether I was bleeding. Silence settled between them. Neither looked away. For several heartbeats, the world outside disappeared. No Mafia war. No assassin. No priceless heirloom. Only 2 lonely people standing far too close. Lorenzo slowly reached toward her face. Emily felt her breath catch. Again, his hand stopped inches away. Always stopping. Always holding back. What? She whispered. He gently brushed a streak of dried soot from her cheek with the back of his fingers. Nothing more. His touch lasted barely a second. Yet Emily felt it long after he stepped away. Suddenly, Marco burst into the room. We have a problem. Lorenzo immediately turned serious. Report. The intruder escaped. I assumed. Marco tossed the Queen of Hearts onto the table. Emily looked at the card. What's that? Neither man answered. Finally, Marco spoke. 22 years ago. He looked at Lorenzo. She was the best assassin your father ever trained. Emily frowned. Your father trained assassins? Lorenzo ignored the question. She died. Marco nodded slowly. That's what everyone believed. Emily looked between them. Who? Marco's voice became almost a whisper. Isabella Moretti. The name seemed to echo through the room. Lorenzo's expression hardened. My sister. Emily froze. You have a sister? I had. Marco shook his head. Apparently, he looked toward the dark hallway. You still do. The room fell silent. Emily stared at Lorenzo. You never told me. I didn't know. You thought she was dead? So did the entire Mafia. His fists slowly tightened. If Isabella was alive, everything he believed about his family's murder could be a lie. Everything. Before anyone could speak again, a security guard sprinted into the library. His face had gone completely pale. Boss. What? We opened the jewelry box again. And... The guard swallowed. There wasn't just a necklace inside. Emily frowned. What do you mean? The guard carefully placed a folded piece of yellowed paper on the table. It hadn't been there before. Someone, somehow, had hidden it beneath the velvet lining. Lorenzo unfolded it carefully. Only one sentence had been written. In faded black ink. Protect Emily Carter. She is the last daughter of the Ash Society. The room went completely silent. Emily looked at the note, then at Lorenzo. I don't even know what the Ash Society is. Lorenzo slowly raised his eyes to meet hers. For the first time since they met, the most feared mafia boss in America looked genuinely afraid. Not for himself. For her, because if the note was true, Emily Carter wasn't caught in the middle of the war. She had been born at its center.